There is a new trend of EU citizens from France, from Spain, from Germany renouncing or thinking of renouncing their citizenship in exchange for a more free citizenship. This is unprecedented for EU citizens. It's quite normal for US citizens. I was a US citizen. I renounced my US citizenship. And now on YouTube, I've been seeing a lot of videos specifically about Spanish citizens, German citizens. I speak Spanish and German, and also a lot of French citizens are thinking of renouncing their citizenship because they think that it's going to be just like the United States, citizenship-based taxation. And in my opinion, citizenship-based taxation is coming to the European Union, most likely because taxation is a national interest, is at the national level. It's going to come to some specific countries. I don't think Slovakia or Romania or Poland or Lithuania or any of these countries are going to start taxing their citizens, but Spain, which is extremely aggressive, France, which is extremely aggressive, Germany, Netherlands, all these countries that are part of the EU that also have very strong tax systems and they chase you all over the world, it's very likely that they will use their power, that they will use the euro, that they will use their influence around the world to tax you even if you left the country. Just like Norway, although not part of the European Union, if you move to a so-called tax haven or you move to a country that they don't like, they can keep taxing you for many years in the future. Spain, for example, has an exit tax. And if you move to a tax haven, they're going to make it hard for you to become tax non-resident in Spain. The next step is to tax you multiple years in the future and also tax you on your citizenship. If you're thinking about getting some sort of European citizenship, maybe by ancestry, I don't think that's going to apply to you as much as, for example, getting a US passport, because any US citizen, even if you get it by naturalization, by birth, by ancestry, whatever, you're subject to US tax law. What I think is going to happen is those EU citizens that live in their EU country for a certain amount of time, for example, the exit tax in Spain is 10 years. If you lived in Spain 10 years out of the last 15 and you were a tax resident, the exit tax applies to you. I think they're going to start implementing the same in these high-tax EU countries, where if you've been a resident for 5 years, or 3 years, or 7 years, whatever they want, they're going to continue taxing you unless you move to their specific list of countries that they allow you to move to. For example, they have to be within the European Union, or they have to be high-tax countries like Canada or Australia. If you move to anywhere else, you move to Paraguay, you move to UAE, no, you still need to pay taxes for the next 3 years. I see this happening over the next 5 years. They're going to launch some sort of citizenship-style taxation, not as strong as the United States, because the US controls the US dollar, obviously, and they have FATCA. Every bank around the world needs to report back to the United States if a US citizen opens a bank account there. And in a form at the bank, you fill out if you're a US citizen or not. What I think is going to happen is that they're going to do this at the local level, at the country level, and they're going to require you to show tax residency in one of their preferred countries. In countries that are not declared as tax havens, countries that have competitive tax rates. For example, Spain has a list of competitive tax countries where basically the tax rate is too low for their liking. And if you have a company there, it's automatically a controlled foreign corporation if you're a Spanish tax resident. Or if you move to one of these countries, it's a red flag for the Spanish tax department because they see it as a tax haven. That's coming. And a lot of EU citizens, for example, I recently saw a video of a French citizen who renounced his French citizenship and got Panamanian citizenship by living in Panama for many years. We will see this more and more. Spanish citizens that are getting Argentina citizenship or Serbian citizenship. I'm here in our office in Belgrade, Serbia. They're choosing citizenships outside of the European Union, outside of these high regulations. For example, they can get citizenship by investment in the Caribbean, although I wouldn't recommend it. For example, I met a guy from Singapore who renounced his Singaporean citizenship and got Vanuatu citizenship. That case, I wouldn't recommend it because you're going from a top tier level citizenship to a C tier level citizenship and you're restricting your life in many, many ways. The same I see it with St. Kitts, with Caribbean passports. I love St. Kitts. I love Caribbean passports. I have a St. Kitts passport. I have mine right here. I got it for a $150,000 donation. I wouldn't really recommend renouncing on only this. I would recommend renouncing on a portfolio or renouncing on a citizenship like a Mexico, a Panama, an Argentina, something more legitimate, something more of a country that you would actually live in the future. And renouncing, although renouncing EU citizenship, now that I think about it while making this video, isn't as hardcore as renouncing US citizenship, because you can always get back in to the EU, into the Schengen area, with some sort of golden visa. Let's say you're Spanish, you renounce your Spanish citizenship, and you get Mexican, you get Serbian, you get Turkish. You can always get a golden visa in Portugal and then just stay in Spain 6 months per year and stay in Portugal 6 months per year and be a tax resident of Portugal. You would be a tourist in Spain, not a citizen anymore, but still, you would then get Portuguese citizenship after 5 years if you want to get the Portuguese citizenship and be a EU citizen again. So it's a lot easier to get into the EU. It's a lot easier to live in the EU versus living in the United States after renouncing citizenship. For example, I need a visa to go to the US, and it's a hassle because I renounced my US citizenship, so now I need to ask for permission to go back to the US. So overall, it's pretty terrible to renounce US citizenship if you want to keep going back. When it comes to Europe, a lot of Europeans are realizing our continent, the European Union, is heading in the wrong direction. Let me get something outside of the EU, but still geographically in Europe, like in the Balkans, for example. That's why I talk about Serbia so much. Or they get some Caribbean citizenship or Latin American citizenship, be outside the influence of EU, and potentially at some point renounce my EU citizenship. Over the next couple of years, these countries are going to get stricter. Capital controls, for example, in Spain, you can't pay for most things in cash. If you send a transfer over 3,000 euros, that's a red flag. You need documentation. They're going to start restricting crypto. In 2027, they're going to start restricting what purchases you make. Real estate taxes are going up. So overall, they're going the direction of controlling citizens more. And the next logical step is to add a list of countries that you cannot move to unless you want to keep paying taxes for many years. And the next logical step is citizenship-based taxation at the highest level that they can get away with. Because the US can get away with controlling every bank around the world because they control the US dollar. The euro is also pretty powerful. So the EU could come together and say, okay, we control the euro. Now, for example, they added Bulgaria to the Eurozone. There's a lot of protests happening because of that. Prices are going to keep going up. I recently met a Croatian client who he hates that Croatia joined the Eurozone. He likes that Croatia's in the EU, but he wanted to have the original currency, the kuna, because then the country had more sovereignty. Then the country could do more of their own decisions. Now they need to do whatever the EU tells them. So you're going to keep seeing this happening. You're going to keep seeing these countries go more and more and more, restricting your freedom and your money, and you should get a second citizenship, even if you have one of the top passports in the world. As an EU citizen, get a second citizenship just in case. I wouldn't really recommend renouncing to most EU citizens or to 99.9% of them for now, unless you see restrictions going higher and higher and higher. But always just get a second citizenship just in case. If you want to see the best second citizenships for EU citizens, I made a video exactly on this, what passports around the world you can get as an EU citizen fast and efficiently. Check out this video right here on the best citizenships and best passports for EU citizens. Check it out right here.